Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the series, What if Itachi Uchiha was reincarnated in My Hero Academia? We will continue the story with part 2. Chapter 2. In the grand hall, Yana and Takashi watched as Erika led Itachi to his room. Yana glanced at Takashi, her voice tinged with irritation. You don't seem impressed, Takashi. Takashi crossed his arms, his expression hard. What did he say his quirk was again? Seeing everything in slow motion. Is that it? Yana's eyes narrowed, defensive. And predicting movements, which is a very powerful quirk, Takashi. Takashi shook his head, dismissive. He's not going to be a great hero, Yana. Yana's anger flared, her voice rising. What are you saying, Takashi? Itachi has a quirk. He will become a hero. I believe in him. Takashi sighed, frustration evident. Okay, let's say he becomes a hero. What's he going to do? Dodge attacks all day? What about offense? How will he handle someone with a strong physical quirk? Yana fell silent, the weight of Takashi's words hitting her. She didn't know how to respond. Takashi took her silence as validation. Exactly. Even if he trains his body, he'll never stand a chance against someone with superior strength. If he had inherited my quirk, maybe he could have become a renowned hero. But instead, he got something else, a weak, useless quirk. He's practically quirkless. Yana's face flushed with anger. Takashi, mind your words. Before she could finish, her eyes widened in shock. Standing at the base of the stairs, quietly watching, was Itachi. His face was expressionless, but his eyes told a different story. Beside him, Erika gripped his hand tightly, her face pale. Itachi. Yana whispered, her heart breaking as she realized he had heard everything. Takashi turned, his eyes meeting his son's narrow, sad gaze. He sighed, trying to compose himself. I told you to stay in your room, Itachi. Itachi's eyes were filled with sorrow and hurt, yet his voice remained calm. I was hungry, so we were heading to the kitchen. His voice was quiet but firm. But I heard everything. Yana's heart shattered at the sight of her son, his small body carrying the weight of emotions far too heavy for him. Itachi, I. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her words, but said nothing more. With measured steps, he descended the stairs and headed straight for the kitchen, Erika following behind silently. In the kitchen, Itachi quietly took some food and turned back toward his room. As he passed his mother, Yana's eyes filled with shock as she noticed his quirk had activated, two tomo spinning slowly in his eyes. Itachi, your eyes. She whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Itachi looked at her, his face still emotionless, yet his eyes carried the weight of sadness that no child should bear. Thank you, mother, he said softly before turning and walking back to his room, leaving Yana standing there, frozen, her heart torn between guilt and sorrow. As Itachi entered his room, the air felt heavier. The door clicked softly behind him as Erika stood near the cradle, hesitant. She looked at Itachi, her heart aching for the young boy who had endured too much for his age. Itachi. She began, but he raised a small hand, his gaze still calm but distant. Erika, he said softly, could you leave me for a moment? Surprised by the maturity in his voice, she hesitated but nodded. Of course, young master. She offered him a gentle smile, though her eyes shimmered with worry. After one last glance, she quietly exited, leaving Itachi alone with his thoughts. The silence in the room seemed to echo. Itachi stood by the window, gazing out at the moonlit sky, a soft breeze brushing through the curtains. His small hands clenched into fists by his sides as he thought back to his father's harsh words, the weight of them settling like a stone in his chest. Practically quirkless. The words repeated in his mind, their sharpness cutting deeper than any blade. He was just a child in this new world, but he was no stranger to pain. The scars of his past life still lingered, haunting him in ways he couldn't yet explain. Here, in this life, he had been given a new beginning, but those who should have believed in him, the ones meant to love him unconditionally, had already cast doubt on his future. Why does power always have to define worth? He wondered. In my previous life, it was the same. Power, strength, control. It always led to suffering. Itachi's eyes, now heavy with the weight of old and new sorrows, filled with a single tear. It rolled down his cheek silently, leaving a cool trail against his skin. He quickly wiped it away, annoyed at the vulnerability it betrayed. He wasn't just mourning his father's words, he was mourning the expectations this world seemed to place on him, even as a child. In this world, too, strength is everything. And yet, what does it really mean to be strong? He glanced down at his small hands. They seemed so fragile, so powerless. But inside him, he knew there was more, there was resolve. In his old life, he had fought to protect what he loved, sacrificing everything. Could he find a way to do that again, even here, even now? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Itachi. Yana's voice came through gently, hesitating at the threshold. Without waiting for his response, she entered slowly, her face lined with concern. She saw him by the window, his back to her, and immediately sensed the gravity of the moment. Yana moved closer, sitting down on the bed beside him, her presence tender and quiet. She reached out and touched his small hand, which lay limply by his side. Itachi. I'm so sorry you heard all of that. Her voice trembled slightly. Your father, he doesn't understand. Itachi remained silent, his gaze still focused on the night sky, but Yana noticed his other hand gripping the windowsill tightly. She continued, her heart heavy. You're so young, but you already carry so much. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, least of all your father. You're special, Itachi. Not because of your quirk, but because of who you are. He turned to her slowly, his dark eyes meeting hers, and Yana's breath caught when she saw the depth of sadness in them. He looked at her with a wisdom that didn't belong to a child, and yet he still seemed so lost. I don't want to disappoint you, Itachi whispered, his voice barely audible, but it carried the weight of his turmoil. Yana felt her chest tighten, tears welling in her eyes. She gathered him into her arms, holding him tightly, as if to shield him from the harshness of the world outside. You could never disappoint me, Itachi. Never. As she held him close, Itachi closed his eyes, allowing himself this brief moment of comfort. The warmth of his mother's embrace reminded him that, despite the pain, there was still love in this world. And perhaps, that was enough. She pulled back slightly, her eyes soft but concerned, and spoke quietly, Itachi. I saw your eyes earlier. The two Tomo. What happened? Itachi stilled for a moment. He had been expecting this, but it didn't make the moment any easier. He knew she deserved the truth, but how could he explain something so complex, so deeply rooted in who he was a child now, yes, but with the soul of a man who had seen and endured far too much. Taking a deep breath, he looked up at her, his dark eyes, no longer adorned with the Tomo, reflecting both innocence and the wisdom of his previous life. I don't know, mother. I just felt something inside when I heard father's words. It made me feel strange. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It wasn't like before, but it was there, just for a moment. Yana's brows furrowed slightly, her gaze searching his face for more. She wanted to press, to understand, but she could see the turmoil in him. The weight of the world already rested on his small shoulders, and she didn't want to burden him further. She nodded slowly, as if weighing his words, her heart torn between concern and trust. I see, she finally said, her voice gentle. Perhaps, it's something that will happen as you grow. Your quirk may evolve differently than we expect. She smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Just know, Itachi, whatever it is, I will always be proud of you. Itachi felt a pang of guilt. He had given her just enough of the truth to satisfy her for now, but deep inside, he knew his Sharingan his Tomo was something far more than just a quirk. It was a remnant of the world he came from, a world of blood, sacrifice, and endless battle. Yet, in this moment, he wasn't ready to share that part of himself. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring nod, forcing a smile to his lips. Thank you, mother. Yana sighed softly, her expression softening as she placed a gentle hand on his head, smoothing down his dark hair. You should sleep now, my little one. You've had a long day. Her voice was soothing, the kind that could easily lull a child to sleep. But Itachi didn't move. His mind was still restless, swirling with thoughts and unresolved emotions. Yana noticed his hesitation and, with a tender smile, gestured for him to lie down. Come here, she said softly, patting her lap. Itachi's eyes widened slightly in surprise. He hadn't expected her to offer such comfort, such warmth, but something inside him, something long buried, craved it. Without another word, he shifted closer and gently rested his head on her lap. Yana gently stroked Itachi's hair, her fingers gliding through the soft strands as his head rested on her lap. The warmth of her touch seemed to calm him, and the quiet of the night wrapped around them like a protective blanket. She looked down at him, her heart swelling with pride and affection, yet curiosity tugged at her thoughts. Itachi, she began softly, breaking the silence, what kind of hero do you want to be? Itachi's eyes opened slowly, thoughtful and calm. He had already considered this question many times in his mind. He didn't need to think long. I don't want to be a hero for money or fame, he said quietly, his voice carrying a maturity far beyond his years. I like peace. So. I want to be a hero for peace. Yana paused, letting his words sink in. Her chest swelled with pride, yet a quiet awe followed. At his age, most children spoke of wanting to be like their favorite heroes, inspired by grand battles and glory. But her son, her Itachi, was different. There was a calmness, a depth to him that was hard to put into words. She felt it every time she looked into his eyes, and now, hearing these words, she knew it even more. She smiled softly, her voice tender. A hero for peace, that's a beautiful answer, Itachi. She gently patted his head, her fingers brushing his temple. Is that like All Might? He's the symbol of peace, after all. Itachi's small body shifted slightly, and he turned his head just enough to look up at her, his dark eyes serious, reflecting a wisdom no 4-year-old should have. No, not like All Might. Yana blinked in surprise. But you know he's the one people look to for peace, don't you? He's loved by so many because he's their beacon of hope. She spoke gently, trying to understand what her son meant. Itachi nodded, his expression calm yet firm. I know, mother. All Might is a great hero, but I don't want to be him. Yana's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by his response. Then who do you want to be? She asked, her voice soft but curious. I want to be Itachi Yaoyorozu, not All Might. His voice was resolute, steady, yet somehow filled with a quiet longing. There was no envy in his tone, no desire to follow in someone else's footsteps. It was clear he had already forged his own path, even at such a young age. Yana's heart swelled. For a moment, she couldn't speak, the depth of his words washing over her. She understood now. He didn't just want to be a hero in the shadow of another, he wanted to carve his own identity, his own path to peace, and his own way of being a hero. With a soft chuckle, she gently cupped his cheek, her eyes shining with admiration. Are you really just 4 years old, Itachi? She asked, her voice teasing but filled with warmth. Itachi gave a small smile, that same knowing smile that often made her wonder just how much he really understood about the world. Yeah, he replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing. Yana exhaled a quiet laugh, her heart filled with both awe and pride. She gently kissed his forehead, lingering for a moment as she cradled his face. You're going to be amazing, Itachi. Not because of a quirk, or because of what others think, but because of who you are. My dear will become a strong and handsome hero. Itachi's smile softened, and though he didn't speak, the peace that settled in his chest was evident in the way he closed his eyes, resting again on his mother's lap. Her words, her touch, her unwavering belief in him, those were the things that mattered most. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room as Itachi slowly stirred from sleep. His dark eyes fluttered open, taking in the familiar surroundings. The warmth of his mother's presence from last night had already faded, and he immediately noticed she wasn't there. Sitting up slowly, he looked around the empty room, a sense of quietness settling in his chest. She must have left early, he thought, his expression calm but with a faint hint of longing. The comforting touch of her hand on his head from the night before lingered in his memory. He sighed softly, allowing the peaceful moment to fade as he began to ready himself for the day ahead. A gentle knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in, he called out, his voice steady and composed. The door creaked open, revealing Erika, her ever-kind smile lighting up the room as she entered, holding a steaming cup of coffee on a small tray. Good morning, young master, she greeted, her tone warm and familiar. Itachi smiled faintly, appreciating her kindness. Good morning, Erika, he replied softly. His small hands reached for the cup, and as he took a sip, the rich, warm flavor of the coffee touched his senses, the slight bitterness balanced by just the right amount of sweetness. It wasn't often that he indulged in these little comforts, but today, it felt like a small ritual grounding him before the day began. How are you feeling this morning? Erika asked, her voice gentle but curious, watching him with concern. Itachi set the cup down, his smile remaining as calm as always. I'm fine, Erika. Thank you. There was tranquility in his words, though the sharpness in his gaze hinted that his thoughts were already elsewhere, planning, thinking ahead. Erika nodded, relieved by his response. That's good to hear, she said, her eyes briefly glancing over him as if to ensure there were no hidden worries. Then she added with a soft chuckle, you should get freshened up. Breakfast is ready, and it's not good to start your day on an empty stomach. Itachi nodded, grateful for her attention to detail. I'll be down shortly, he said, standing up from his bed, his small form moving with a grace and maturity far beyond his years. He glanced toward the door as Erika excused herself, leaving him alone once again. Itachi descended the stairs with quiet steps, the faint clinking of dishes and the murmur of voices guiding him toward the dining hall. As he entered, the atmosphere shifted immediately. His mother, Yana, sat at the head of the table, her face lighting up the moment she saw him. She greeted him with a warm smile, her love always a source of comfort for him. Good morning, Itachi, Yana said softly, her voice gentle and welcoming. Itachi nodded respectfully, his voice calm as he replied, Good morning, mother. He didn't look at his father, Takashi, who sat opposite Yana, his posture stiff and rigid, eyes already narrowing as Itachi walked past him without a word. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface for some time now felt more tangible than ever in the room. The air grew heavy, pressing down on all of them like an invisible weight. Takashi's eyes darkened, his displeasure clear as he watched his son sit at the table, calm and unaffected by the cold tension between them. Finally, he broke the silence, his tone sharp with irritation. It seems my son has forgotten his manners. You greet your mother but not your father. Itachi paused for a moment, his face expressionless. Good morning, he said simply, before turning his attention to his food. The weight of Takashi's disapproval hung in the air, thick and suffocating, but Itachi remained composed. Yana, sensing the growing tension, quickly stepped in, her voice warm yet slightly forced in an attempt to lighten the mood. Itachi, you'll be attending kindergarten from tomorrow, she said, smiling softly. It's a well-known school, where you can make friends. Isn't that exciting? Itachi looked up from his plate, offering his mother a polite smile. Whatever you wish, mother. Yana returned his smile, a hint of pride in her eyes. I know you already know how to read and write, which is quite impressive for your age. But schooling is compulsory, and it'll be good for you. I understand, Itachi replied with a nod, his tone respectful yet distant. Takashi remained silent throughout the exchange, his displeasure simmering beneath the surface. Without a word, he stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back. "I'll take my leave," he said to Yana before walking out of the room, his footsteps heavy as he disappeared through the door. Itachi watched his father leave, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he turned to his mother. "Mother, I want to ask a favor." Yana, always attuned to her son, looked at him with a gentle smile. "Anything, Itachi." "What is it?" "I want to work on my physical strength," Itachi said calmly, his dark eyes meeting hers with a quiet determination. Yana's smile faltered slightly. "But, dear, you're only 4 years old. I don't think it's the right age to start serious physical training." Itachi didn't argue, simply nodding in understanding. "I see." Yana, sensing his resolve, thought for a moment before offering a compromise. "If you want, you can start some light exercises at home for a year. Then, when you're ready, I'll enroll you in a dojo where you can learn different fighting styles. Does that sound fair?" Itachi nodded, his respect for his mother clear in his calm acceptance. "Thank you, mother." Yana smiled softly, her heart warmed by her son's maturity. "You're welcome, my dear." As they resumed their meal, Yana glanced at him again, her curiosity piqued. "Itachi, I've heard from Erika that you've been reading rather complicated books lately. Philosophy, history, those are heavy subjects for someone your age." Itachi sighed lightly, glancing over to Erika, who was standing by the door, sweating nervously. She quickly turned away, pretending to whistle, clearly uncomfortable under his gaze. Yana chuckled at the exchange, her tone light. "You know you shouldn't spend all your time in one room, right?" She teased gently, looking back at her son with a smile. Itachi nodded, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Yes, mother." Yana continued, her voice soft but firm. "And you really should reduce your coffee intake. It's not good for you." Itachi raised an eyebrow, his expression almost playful. "That's your fault. You gave me a sip once, and now I'm addicted." Yana sighed, shaking her head with a mock look of regret. "That's the one thing I truly regret," she said with a chuckle. Itachi smiled, the warmth between them a stark contrast to the cold atmosphere that had filled the room earlier. He stood up from the table, bowing slightly. "I'll take my leave now, mother." Yana nodded, her eyes soft with affection. "Of course, dear. Take care." Itachi sat down at his desk, his young hands neatly aligning the blank paper in front of him. He had a focused look on his face as he began mapping out his timetable, Erika standing nearby with a curious gaze. She leaned over slightly, her voice soft. "What are you doing, Itachi?" Without looking up, he responded, "From tomorrow, I'll start working on my body." His thoughts wandered for a moment, reflecting on the power of his Tsutomu Sharingan. "I need to work on controlling it, but still, without chakra, it might have some side effects. I need to test and monitor that closely." He took his pen, writing down the details with precision. After a moment, he turned to Erika, who was still watching him. "Do you know the school timings for the nursery?" Erika thought for a moment, then nodded. "Around 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Itachi nodded and resumed his planning. After a few more minutes, he looked over his completed schedule, feeling a sense of satisfaction. "Done," he murmured to himself, setting the pen down. Erika, still standing beside him, glanced at the timetable with a raised eyebrow. "Itachi, isn't this a bit intense?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. 5 a.m. exercise until 7:30, then study from 6 to 7, and quirk training from 10? You're only 4, after all." Itachi glanced at her, his face calm and thoughtful. "I don't think so," he replied, his tone quiet yet certain, and he thought, "I've done far tougher exercises in my previous life. At first, it might be challenging, but I know my body. It feels familiar. Now that I've regained my Sharingan, I feel like I can handle this." Erika watched him, still concerned but knowing the determination in his eyes. She sighed softly. "If you say so, but if you ever need help, I'll be here. Don't push yourself too hard." Itachi gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I know, Erika. But please, don't tell my mother about this." Erika blinked, surprised. "Why not? She gave you permission to train, didn't she?" He nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his young face. "She did, but if she sees this timetable, she'll reduce the time for me. She worries too much." Erika sighed, her concern still evident, but she understood. "All right," she said with a smile. "I won't say anything. Just, take care of yourself." Itachi smiled back, appreciating her understanding. Itachi woke up at exactly 4:55 a.m., the room still bathed in early morning darkness. He glanced at the time and whispered to himself, "Okay." Just then, a soft knock came at his door. "Come in," he called out. Erika opened the door with a smile. "I came to wake you up, but you're already awake," she said, holding a cup of coffee. "I brought this for you." Itachi returned her smile, nodding. "Thank you, Erika." He took the cup, savoring the warmth of the drink as it flowed through him, a small comfort before the physical challenge ahead. After a moment, he set the cup down and said, "Shall we move to the backyard?" Erika nodded, and they both made their way outside. The yard was vast, about 300 square meters, the early morning air cool against Itachi's skin. He began with running, his small legs propelling him across the yard in steady strides. But after just 5 laps, he could feel the burn of fatigue deep in his muscles, his breath coming in heavy gasps. I really have low stamina, he thought, frustrated. He slowed to a stop, sweat pouring down his face, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Erika hurried over with a towel and a bottle of water, her expression one of quiet concern. "Here, clean yourself up," she said softly. Itachi nodded, taking the towel to wipe the sweat from his face before gratefully accepting the water. "Thank you," he said between breaths. Erika smiled, but her eyes lingered on him, her thoughts swirling with questions. Despite his exhaustion, Itachi wasn't finished. He moved on to push ups, his body trembling with effort as he completed 20, his arms shaking by the end. He collapsed momentarily, catching his breath once more. "It's good that I'm starting this early," he thought, pushing himself to keep going. After a short break, he transitioned into sit ups, managing 30 before moving on to crunches, completing another 30 repetitions. From a distance, Erika watched him with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was witnessing. "He's only 4 years old," she marveled silently. "And without a strength-enhancing quirk. How is he managing this?" She had so many questions. Could his ocular quirk be enhancing his physical capabilities too? She recalled the moment she first saw his eyes, noticing how they now had 2 tomo instead of 1. Is that part of his strength? By 7 a.m., Itachi was drenched in sweat from his morning workout. Erika approached him with a towel and a bottle of water, concern in her voice as she said, "That's enough for now, Itachi. I think you should get ready for school." Itachi nodded, accepting the towel and wiping his face. His body ached, but he felt satisfied. He made his way to his room, freshened up, and put on his school uniform, a crisp white shirt, a neatly tied tie, and shorts. Looking at himself in the mirror, he sweat dropped and muttered, "This looks so weird." Erika, standing beside him, chuckled softly. "It looks good on you, Itachi." He turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "Yeah, really. Trust me, you pull it off. Some kids look awful in school uniforms, but not you." Itachi sighed, the corner of his lips twitching into a small smile. Kana Hagaku's school uniforms were way better, he thought. He made his way to the dining hall and found his mother and father already seated. Yana's eyes lit up as she saw him. "AHH, my baby looks so cute." She cooed. Itachi's sweat dropped again, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Thank you, mother," he replied, taking a seat at the table. Yana smiled warmly. "Get something to eat. You'll need your energy for your first day of school." Itachi began eating, the food comforting him after the intense workout. "Are you excited for your first day?" Yana asked, her voice filled with encouragement. "Not really," Itachi replied honestly, shrugging slightly. Yana sighed, a playful pout on her lips. "You should be. You'll make new friends today." Itachi gave her a small nod, not wanting to disappoint her. "Okay." At that moment, Takashi, who had been sitting silently, stood up. His tone was as cold as ever as he spoke. "Just focus on your studies. I don't want the Yaoyorozu name being tarnished." Without waiting for a response, he walked out of the room. Itachi said nothing, continuing to eat in silence. Yana clenched her fists in frustration, muttering, "I want to hit that man over the head sometimes." Itachi glanced at her, a gentle smile on his lips. "It's okay, mother. As long as you and Erika believe in me, that's more than enough." Yana's frustration melted as she looked at her son, her heart swelling with pride. "You and Erika sure are close," she remarked with a soft smile. Itachi chuckled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "You could say that." Finishing his meal, Itachi stood up and said, "I'll be going now, mother." Yana quickly stood up as well. "Wait, Itachi," she called, stopping him in his tracks. He turned to face her, curiosity in his eyes. Yana walked over and pulled him into a gentle hug, kissing his forehead tenderly. "Make some friends today, okay?" she whispered. Itachi looked up at her, a soft smile on his face. "I will." And with that, he turned and left, his heart feeling just a little bit lighter as he walked toward his first day of school. Itachi stepped into the sleek, black car, and the driver silently began the journey to the nursery school. The hum of the engine was the only sound that filled the air, while Itachi gazed out of the window, his thoughts already racing ahead. This is the first day, he thought. Another beginning, but this time, everything's different. As they arrived, the car stopped in front of the brightly colored school building. The playground outside was filled with children running and laughing, carefree in their joy. Itachi stepped out, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. "They're so carefree, but they're just children," he mused, watching them chase after one another. "Just like me now, I suppose." The realization struck him oddly, like an echo from a lifelong past. He was physically 4 years old, yes, but mentally, the weight of his previous life, his experiences, his decisions still bore heavily on him. He watched the children with a quiet detachment, feeling both a part of them and completely alienated at the same time. How strange, to be among them and yet feel so far away. He made his way inside, where a warm-faced teacher greeted him. "Good morning. You must be Itachi Yaoyorozu," she said with a smile. "Good morning," Itachi replied, his voice polite, calm, and measured beyond his years. He offered a respectful bow, which earned him a slightly puzzled look from the teacher, but she quickly masked it with another smile. As he entered the classroom, the vibrant atmosphere washed over him. The walls were covered with colorful posters, drawings from students, and alphabet charts. Children were scattered around, chatting happily with one another, sharing toys, giggling, and whispering. They all seemed so lost in their world, so blissfully unaware of anything beyond the present moment. Itachi stood at the entrance, observing them. This innocence. It reminded him of a distant time, a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. His mind drifted back to his days in the academy, those fleeting moments with Izumi and Shisui. He remembered Izumi's soft laughter, the way her eyes would brighten whenever they trained together. And Shisui, his brother in spirit, his mentor, his friend. The thought of Shisui brought a pang of pain, a deep ache in his chest. They were both gone now, lost to a world of violence and sacrifice. If only things had been different. He could still see their faces, clear as day. Izumi's kind smile, the one she always wore just for him. Shisui's strong, reassuring presence, the way he always stood by Itachi's side no matter how hard things got. We were children once, too, he realized. But we never had the chance to be this carefree. Our world never allowed it. As the voices of the children swirled around him, a strange sense of nostalgia mixed with sorrow welled up inside him. He knew what lay ahead for all of them: the loss, the pain, the weight of decisions too heavy for someone their age. He had lived through it once and now, here he was, starting again. But this time, he was determined. I won't let this world break me like the last one did. I won't let it break them. A small voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Hey, are you new here? A young boy stood in front of him, looking up at him with curious eyes. Itachi blinked as he brought himself back to the present. Yes, he replied, offering the boy a small smile. As he observed him, Itachi noticed something unusual: a pair of wings sprouting from the boy's back. Wings? Itachi commented, raising an eyebrow. The boy grinned widely, proud of his quirk. Yeah. That's my quirk, fierce wings. He extended his hand enthusiastically. Hello, I'm Kigo Takamai. And you? Itachi took the boy's hand and shook it politely. I'm Itachi Yaoyorozu. It's nice to meet you. Kigo's eyes sparkled with curiosity. So, what's your quirk? Itachi paused for a moment, then replied, it's an ocular quirk. Kigo tilted his head in confusion. Aka what? Itachi sighed softly. An eye quirk. Kigo stared at Itachi's eyes with excitement. Whoa, that's so cool. So you can, like, grow eyes anywhere? Itachi's sweat dropped at the misunderstanding. No, not like that. Let me finish. Kigo, nodding eagerly, stayed quiet, his wings fluttering slightly in anticipation. Itachi activated his Sharingan, and Kigo gazed at his eyes, saying, wow, your eyes look so cool. I have an eye quirk that allows me to see everything in slow motion. I can predict movements before they happen, Itachi explained calmly. Kigo's eyes went wide in amazement. Whoa, that's so awesome. That means you can see every move people make, right? Itachi nodded, watching Kigo's infectious enthusiasm. Without warning, Kigo thrust his hand out again, gripping Itachi's hand with a firm shake. So, let's be friends. He declared with a huge grin. Itachi stood still for a moment, processing the boy's boundless energy. But then, a small, genuine smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Friends, Itachi said softly, allowing the warmth of the moment to seep into him. Kigo, beaming, flapped his wings lightly in excitement. Great. We're gonna be the best team, I just know it. As the day started, Itachi and Kigo sat together in the nursery classroom. The teacher called for everyone to gather, and Kigo quickly pulled a chair beside Itachi, his excitement radiating from every word. You'll see, this place isn't too bad. We get to play a lot. Kigo grinned, his wings fluttering slightly. Itachi, however, nodded quietly, feeling indifferent. While the other children eagerly embraced the idea of playing, Itachi was less than enthusiastic. To him, it felt like a waste of time, meaningless, childish games that had no purpose beyond distraction. The day progressed with various activities, coloring, playing with blocks, and outdoor games. Kigo, full of energy, clung to Itachi the entire time, urging him to participate. Come on, Itachi. Let's build the biggest tower. Kigo called out, practically dragging Itachi to the block area. Itachi sighed internally. He would have much preferred to sit quietly and observe, but Kigo's persistence left him with little choice. Begrudgingly, he stacked a few blocks, his mind elsewhere. I don't belong here, Itachi thought, his patience wearing thin. He had no interest in playing or pretending. His past life, filled with duty and sacrifice, made these activities feel trivial. During snack time, Kigo leaned over, whispering excitedly, "We're gonna be the coolest in this place. You've got the eye quirk, and I can fly." His wings fluttered proudly, drawing the attention of their classmates. Itachi, sipping his juice in silence, kept his thoughts to himself. Cool. The concept seemed pointless to him. But Kigo, oblivious to Itachi's disinterest, continued to chatter on. Kigo's optimism was almost overwhelming, and although Itachi didn't share the same excitement, he remained composed. When outdoor play began, Kigo grabbed Itachi's hand, pulling him along toward the playground. "Come on. Let's race," Kigo urged, his enthusiasm showing no signs of slowing down. Itachi signed slightly but followed, knowing resistance would only lead to more pushing. He half-heartedly joined in, running just fast enough to keep pace but never fully engaging. To Itachi, the day dragged on, each activity a reminder of how much he'd rather be doing something else, something meaningful. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Kigo waved dramatically, his wings fluttering in excitement. "See you tomorrow, Itachi. We'll have even more fun." Itachi stood at the school gate, watching Kigo wave goodbye, his energy as unrelenting as ever. Itachi nodded, his expression neutral, and raised a hand in a polite but detached gesture. "Sure," he said quietly, his tone devoid of the warmth Kigo seemed to radiate. As Itachi made his way to the waiting car, the door closed behind him, and the vehicle started moving toward home. The chatter and chaos of the day faded away, leaving Itachi with his thoughts. "It's only temporary," he reminded himself, staring out the window. "I'll endure it." As Itachi stepped into the mansion, he immediately noticed his mother, Yana, sitting on the sofa, her face lighting up with a warm smile the moment she saw him. She stood up and gently walked over to him, her eyes full of curiosity. "Itachi, welcome home," she greeted softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "How was school today?" Itachi, keeping his usual calm demeanor, responded with a short, "Normal." Yana raised an eyebrow, not entirely satisfied with his brief answer but knowing her son well enough not to press too hard. Before she could ask more, Erika came into the room, a light-hearted smile on her face. "Itachi, how was your day?" she asked, leaning in slightly, her expression eager. Itachi looked between his mother and Erika, his calmness unwavering. "As I said, normal." Yana, still smiling, decided to push just a little. "Did you make any friends, dear?" Itachi paused, thinking about Kigo's energetic face and the boy's insistence on being friends. A small sigh escaped his lips as he considered how to phrase it. "Not exactly a friend," he began, his tone carrying a hint of amusement, "but there's someone who will probably annoy me in the future." Yana couldn't help but chuckle at the way he phrased it. "Oh? And who might this future annoyance be?" "His name is Kigo Takamai," Itachi replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "He's persistent, to say the least." Erika grinned at this, her curiosity piqued. "Persistent, huh? Sounds like someone who wants to be your friend, Itachi." Itachi shrugged slightly. "Perhaps." Yana, noticing the rare smile on her son's face, couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and warmth. Erika also saw it and she said with a playful wink, "Well, it's good to see you're connecting with someone, even if you find him a little persistent. Just remember, having someone around, even if they seem like an annoyance, can sometimes turn out to be a blessing," Yana added, her voice soft but meaningful. Itachi considered his mother's words for a moment, his expression growing more thoughtful. Kigo's energy was different, almost refreshing. Maybe she's right. He nodded, not saying anything more, but Yana and Erika could tell that the day had affected him in ways he wasn't quite ready to express yet. Itachi went to his room, changed into more comfortable clothes, and made his way back downstairs to the dining room. As he sat at the table, his mind was still on the day he spent with Kigo and how it felt to experience the normality of a child's life, something he rarely allowed himself to dwell on. Moments later, his mother, Yana, walked in with a soft smile. "Tonight's dinner is quite special," she said warmly, placing a dish in front of him. "I made it just for you." Itachi raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it?" Yana moved her hand away, revealing a plate of dango, perfectly arranged. Itachi's eyes widened slightly, a rare reaction from him. "Dango?" he asked, surprised. He hadn't expected something so thoughtful. "She knows this is my favorite." "I know you like sweets, Itachi," Yana said with a smile, "and dango has always been your favorite." A small, genuine smile tugged at Itachi's lips, and he nodded. "Thank you, mother." He picked up 2 pieces, savoring the familiar sweetness, but as he reached for another, he paused. "I need to watch my intake, especially with the training I started today." "It's delicious," he said, putting down his chopsticks, "but that's enough for me." Yana raised an eyebrow, her expression playful yet firm. "Itachi, boys your age should eat plenty. You need the energy." Itachi was about to explain his reasoning when she interrupted, her voice carrying an authoritative tone. "I'm ordering you to finish your meal. Are you really going to argue with your mother?" He sighed softly, recognizing that familiar motherly insistence that wasn't worth arguing against. "No, mother," he replied, resigned but amused. Without further protest, Itachi continued eating, finishing the dango quickly. Yana watched him with a smile, knowing he still had that serious streak even in such simple moments. See? That wasn't so bad, she teased gently, clearly pleased. Itachi wiped his mouth with a napkin and looked at her with a rare but genuine warmth in his eyes. Thank you, mother. It was nice. Yana's smile deepened. I'm glad, Itachi. I just want to make sure you're happy. After dinner, Itachi and Erika made their way to the backyard. The evening air was cool, and the quiet surroundings made it the perfect time to train. Activating his Sharingan, the familiar red glow flickered in his eyes, and he glanced at Erika. Erika, Itachi said calmly, could you bring me some knives? Erika looked at him in shock, her eyes widening. Why do you need knives? She asked, her voice a mixture of concern and suspicion. Itachi sighed softly, knowing she'd misinterpret his request. Not to kill you, if that's what you're thinking. Not funny, Erika shot back, frowning. Just tell me why you need them. For target practice, Itachi replied in a matter-of-fact tone, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Erika hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded. Fine, she muttered. How many? 6, Itachi responded. Although Erika didn't fully understand why he wanted to practice with knives, she trusted him enough to comply. She went to the kitchen, while Itachi returned to his room to gather some targets. When Erika came back, she saw Itachi positioning wooden targets around the yard, some above him, suspended with sticks, and others at various angles. I brought 6 knives, Erika said, handing them over, still skeptical about what she was about to witness. Thank you, Itachi said calmly, inspecting the knives before stepping into the center of the targets. He assessed the distances with his Sharingan, gauging the angles and the best trajectory for each throw. With a swift, graceful leap, Itachi hurled the knives into the air. The blades spun rapidly, and each one struck its target dead center. The sound of metal hitting wood echoed in the backyard. Erika's eyes widened in disbelief, her mouth slightly agape. She knew Itachi was skilled, but seeing it in action was another thing entirely. Standing at the edge of the yard, someone else had been watching as well, Yana, their mother, who had slipped out to see what her son was up to. Itachi. Erika whispered, still in shock. Itachi landed softly on the ground, exhaling as if what he had just done was nothing out of the ordinary. He stood up, dusting off his hands, and then spoke without turning around. Mother, he said, his tone neutral but knowing. I saw you standing there. Erika turned, startled, and saw Yana stepping out from behind a corner. She looked as composed as always, but her eyes held a certain mix of surprise and pride. After Yana had observed Itachi's flawless knife-throwing practice, her smile faded slightly as her curiosity deepened. There was something about his skills, something beyond what a normal quirk should grant. She walked toward him, her expression more serious now. Itachi, she said in a calm but firm voice, you mentioned your quirk allows you to see in slow motion and predict movement. Is that how you managed such accuracy just now? Itachi, sensing the gravity in her tone, maintained his usual composure. He quickly formulated a believable explanation, knowing he had to be careful with how much he revealed. Actually, mother, he began, his voice even and steady, I was with Kigo earlier. We were just playing around, tossing stones. He challenged me to hit a distant target, so I threw the rock with the help of my eyes, just like I mentioned. After I hit the target accurately, I figured I could apply the same skill to this practice. I wanted to see if my aim would still be as good. Yana's eyes softened, though there was still a trace of concern. She stepped closer, standing in front of him and gently placed her hand on his cheek. Knives are sharp, dear, she said with a motherly tone. If you must practice, use something dull. I don't want you to hurt yourself. Itachi met her gaze, his expression calm but appreciative of her concern. I understand, mother. I'll be more careful next time. He nodded respectfully, knowing that she wouldn't let the matter go otherwise. Yana smiled at his response, though a lingering curiosity remained. She was proud of Itachi but also cautious. Good. Just, promise me, nothing too dangerous. You're still a child, after all. Itachi, taking her words in stride, nodded once more. I promise. Yana seemed satisfied but then raised an eyebrow as if sensing that he had more to say. Is there something else you wanted to ask, Itachi? Itachi hesitated for a brief second but then decided to voice his request. Mother, there's something I would like to have, if it's possible. Yana smiled warmly, clearly willing to indulge her son. Like I've told you before, Itachi. Whatever you need, just ask. Itachi paused, carefully choosing his words. I would like to have some kunao, and shurikens. Yana's eyebrows lifted slightly, a questioning look crossing her face. Kunao and shurikens? Like the ones ninjas use. Itachi's sweat dropped a little, realizing how strange it might sound for a child to request such items. But he nodded, staying composed. Yes. I want to practice with them. They're not much different from throwing knives, but they're more balanced. Yana chuckled lightly, not entirely surprised by his unusual request but finding it amusing nonetheless. Ninja tools, huh? You're quite serious about your training, aren't you? Itachi gave a small, respectful nod. Yes, mother. I want to be prepared. She smiled at him, her love and pride for him clear in her expression. All right, dear. I'll get them for you. But remember, no overdoing it. You're still young. Itachi smiled softly, grateful for her understanding. Thank you, mother. I'll be careful. With that, Yana kissed his forehead once again, her serious demeanor giving way to her warm and nurturing side. Now go rest, Itachi. You've trained enough for today. As Itachi nodded and turned to leave, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not just from his training, but from knowing that his mother trusted him. Still, a small part of him couldn't help but feel the weight of keeping his true abilities hidden. For now, he thought to himself, it's best this way. Itachi, now 8 years old, sat on the hospital bench, his long black hair framing his slim but toned physique. He wore a black shirt and white pants, his expression calm but his eyes betraying his inner worry. Beside him, Erika, dressed in her usual maid outfit, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You don't need to worry, Itachi, Erika said softly, her voice calm and reassuring. Your mother will be fine. She's strong. Itachi nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the hospital door. I know, Erika. But still. I can't help being concerned. Just then, the door to the delivery room opened, and the doctor stepped out. Itachi immediately stood up and hurried over. How is she? He asked, his usually composed voice filled with rare urgency. The doctor smiled warmly. Congratulations, young man. The delivery was successful, and you have a baby sister. Itachi's eyes widened with happiness. Can I see my mother? He asked quickly. The doctor nodded. Yes, you can. Both your mother and sister are doing well. Itachi bowed respectfully. Thank you, doctor. As he headed inside the room, Erika followed, a quiet smile on her face. The doctor watched them go, remarking quietly, such a polite young man. Inside, Itachi saw his mother lying in bed, looking tired but peaceful, with a small cradle beside her. His gaze softened as he approached. Yana looked up at him with a warm smile. Itachi, she greeted him softly, are you feeling all right? You look worried. Itachi moved closer to her bed. I'm fine, mother. Are you feeling tired? Yana chuckled softly. A little. But I'm okay, just a bit worn out from all the excitement. Her eyes drifted to the cradle where the newborn lay. Itachi, come meet your sister. Itachi stepped closer to the cradle and peered inside, seeing the tiny baby wrapped in soft blankets. His usually stoic expression softened as he looked at his sister for the first time. He smiled faintly, and Yana noticed. You're going to be a big brother now, Itachi, she said with a proud, loving smile. Itachi felt something stir in his heart, a sense of responsibility, of care. As he saw her, she reminded him of Sasuke when he was just born. Yana watched him, her eyes full of warmth, before Takashi entered the room. Takashi, Itachi's father, walked in with his usual stern demeanor. He approached the cradle and looked at his newborn daughter, his face softening slightly. Itachi stepped aside to give him room. What should we name her? Takashi asked, his tone serious but contemplative. Yana smiled softly, her voice gentle. How about Momo? Itachi whispered the name to himself. Momo. He smiled again, and Erika, standing in the background, noticed the rare glint of happiness in his eyes. Takashi repeated, Momo. It has a good ring to it. He looked down at the baby. She will be called Momo Yaoyorozu. Yana smiled as Takashi leaned down to kiss her forehead gently. Rest now, he said quietly. As Takashi turned to leave, Itachi observed his father with his usual stoic expression. Just as Takashi reached the door, Yana called out, Takashi. Itachi is here too. Takashi paused for a moment, his back still turned to them. I don't like failure, he said bluntly, before walking out. Itachi didn't react outwardly, but inside, he sighed. He was used to it by now. After a moment of silence, Yana smiled at Itachi and Momo. She seems to like her big brother already. Momo giggled softly in her cradle, her tiny hands reaching out. Itachi's heart softened, and he turned to his mother. May I hold her? Yana's smile widened. Of course, dear. Erika, standing nearby, carefully helped Itachi lift Momo from the cradle. Itachi held her gently, looking down at her small, innocent face. Momo giggled again, staring up at her big brother with bright, curious eyes. As he cradled her, Itachi smiled down at Momo and whispered softly, I will be a good big brother. Yana watched them with pride, while Erika stood silently by, her expression softening as she saw how much Itachi cared for his newborn sister. She's in good hands, Lady Yana, Erika said quietly. Yana nodded, her eyes never leaving her children. Yes, she is. Until next time.